apartment, Baruch Hashem, B'Sha'a Tova. And, it reminds you what it means, Galut. It reminds you what it means to live out of boxes. And it also reminds you that everything out there that we always thought we needed, when it comes time to move, you end up finding out the things you really need and the things you're wondering what you're still doing with. So it's amazing. When you start packing up stuff, you start realizing that we're hoarders. We literally buy stuff to store. Half of the stuff we don't even use. It's amazing. It's a big musar. Big musar. Mamash, when it came time to deciding what's going to go back to the Lakewood house and what's going to stay with us here in the new Brooklyn house, would you believe me if I told you that double the amount of boxes went back to the Lakewood house in storage, and only a quarter of the boxes remained here in Brooklyn for day-to-day life? And we were reminded what we really need to live on and what we fictitiously think we can't live without. We can't survive without. It's a big musar. Reminds us we don't need as much as we think we do. Baruch Hashem, Borei Olam has given us a lot more than we ever needed. It's amazing. So tonight we're going to start with a beracha. Kidarkenu b'kodesh. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give us siyata d'shmaya. We have a big shir tonight. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam sha'akol nihiya bidvaro. Now I got to warn you guys, because I'm in the middle of moving, I didn't have my Sfarim with me. Did not have time to be able to start looking for a new idea. So I decided tonight to go back to something that I worked on for many years, and it was in the making. And tonight I want to present it. This is not the typical share. And if you're coming tonight for the first time, this is definitely something that I'm hoping will surprise you in a way, but at the same time, hit on an incredible hashgacha. You hear this class tonight, I believe you'll never be faint of your faith again. And therefore, chazor ba v'chazor ba d'kula ba. There's a lot in this one tonight. If you're here tonight, you have a zechut, and I'm talking to myself first. I mean that. Tonight is not a typical class at all. And Be'ezat Hashem, we should be zochet the great siyata d'shmaya. Hashem should be merachem and give me the koach hadibur and the siyata d'shmaya to give over a topic that is a yam of brilliance. Mamash kacha. Gentlemen, open your hearts. You've read this parasha so many times. Parashat Vayishlach. And there's so much to speak about in this parasha. We have Yaakov and Esav. I mean, this is the encounter of the drama in this parasha. As children and later on in life, every time we learn the parasha, it blows us away. We spoke a few weeks ago about the number 400. And how every time the number 400 appears, it's the koach of the Sitra Ahara. It's the koach of the Samach Mem. We've spoken about this. Esav comes, 400 men. We've spoken about this. Everything about 400. Ephron demands 400 shekel in order to make the deal with Abraham Avinu. Every time the number 400 is invoked, you know good and well where it's coming from. You know the Sitra Ahara is up to some devious, diabolical plan. But Rabotai, at the end of the day, this parasha is so maleh. Yaakov Esav, the presence, Be'ezat Hashem. I'm hoping Thursday night to really be able to hit that portion of the parasha, maybe like you never heard it before. But tonight I want to touch on a very delicate subject. And you got to be cautious, especially when you're speaking live on a delicate subject. Rabotai, I want to work with you tonight on a subject, a topic in this week's parasha, that every time we learn it, it makes us uneasy. It even puts us in a very uncomfortable position. It's hard to learn, and it's even harder to teach. But I want to touch upon this topic tonight and bring, I'm hoping, with Siyata Dishmaya, a certain or gadol to a topic that's uncomfortable and to demonstrate the brilliance behind maybe what we never knew what was going on. Are you ready for this? I want to talk about the topic of Dina and the terrible story that unfolded in the city of Shechem. But wait, when you hear it tonight, I'm hoping you'll come out with a whole different idea of what the brilliance behind the master plan of Borei Olam. Even at times where we're scratching our head and we don't get it and we don't understand and things don't seem to be fair and things seem to be so, what? The daughter of Yaakov Avinu? The daughter of the Gadol Hador? And that's what happened to her? How did Hashem let that happen? Wait, let's take a step back and let's be able to understand the parasha. Vatetze Dina. That's the way it begins. Vatetze Dina. And Dina goes out. Where is she going to? Says the pasuk. Before I tell you where she's going to, Torah tells us who her mother was. Vatetze Dina bat Leah, asher yaledai leYaakov, lirot bibnot haaretz. She went out to shpatzir. You don't know what that word means. She went out to be mitayelet. She went out to look and search and tour the land. Bibnot haaretz. She ends up in Shechem, and the wrong guy puts his eyes on her. None other than Shechem ben Chamor. Rabotai, take a look over here. The pasuk says, Vatetze Dina. Dina goes out. Bat Leah. She's the daughter of Leah. Says Rashi, pasuk is not telling you that for nothing. Pasuk is telling you something very big. Dina was the daughter of Leah. Hence, Vatetze Dina. Ki ima bita. Like mother, like daughter. Rashi. What? What does her mother have to do with this? It's a little odd that Bat Yisrael, Bat Yaakov, is going out to tour the land. Our women, their righteousness? What does the pasuk in Tehillim say? Kvoda bat melech pnima. The tzniut, the righteous women of Klal Yisrael. You know where you'll find them? Pnima, inside, tsanua. They're not the ones that go out. They're not the ones that are mitayelet. They're not the ones that expose themselves openly. They're the ones that are very modest. They're modest in the way they carry themselves, in the way they speak, and also in where they go. And if that's the case, what's going on over here? Says Rashi, Ki ima bita. Like mother, like daughter. If you ever want to know where that saying came from, it's right here in Rashi. Right? Unbelievable. Everything's from us. Ki ima bita. Like mother, like daughter. Ma ima yatzanit. Av bita yatzanit. Just like the mother went out, so too the daughter went out. What does that mean? Earlier on you'll see, in last parasha it says, Vatetze Leah. Leah went out. Where did she go out to? To meet Yaakov as he was coming back from the fields. To tell him, Yaakov, tonight you thought was the night of Rachel? No. Tonight is my night. Because I switched with her for the Dudaim. I switched with her for these very unique flowers that Reuven brought home for fertility reasons. I gave those flowers to Rachel Akara, and instead I took her night. Vatetze Leah. Leah went out to the field to tell her husband, tonight you're in my tent. So too, says the Torah, like mother, like daughter. Vatetze Dina. Dina went out. But where did Dina go? She went out to tour. She went out to see the land. And of course, instead of her going to see, she was seen by the wrong guy. She was seen by Shechem ben Hamor. And we know the terrible, horrific story that took place after that. What does this mean? Ki'ima bita. Just because it says Leah went out, so automatically on the daughter we say the daughter also went out. I mean, what does that have to do? How does that make sense? Ma'ima yatsanit. The mother is an outgoer. So too the daughter is an outgoer. What does that mean? What do the words even mean, bichlal? What's the pshat? Rabotai, we all know that in this parasha, that incredible moment, Yaakov meets Esav. Esav, as we mentioned a few weeks earlier, Vayar Esav et Hanashim. Torah tells you about this Rasha. The first thing when Esav meets Yaakov, the Pasuk tells us, what is he already looking at? Where his eyes shouldn't be looking. Already, right off the bat. And we explained this a few weeks ago when we said over that shiur on the number 400, and we talked about Ephron. He's the Tsar Ayin. And then we spoke about Esav, and he is the non-shmirat einayim, the guy who doesn't watch his eyes, but he looks at things he's not supposed to be looking at, right? And then we spoke about all the other types of Tsar Ayin and the different types that were out there. Like we spoke about Pinchas and Zimri. Vayar Esav et Hanashim. Chazal tell us that at that point, Yaakov Avinu took Dina and put her in a box. He hid her from Esav. Why? Because Yaakov was worried lest that Rasha would put his eyes on his daughter and he would want her. And to think, to even entertain, to give such a tzaddiket like Dina to such a Rasha like Esav was unthinkable in the eyes of Yaakov Avinu. And because of that, Yaakov Avinu went out and put her in a box. I would like to say it. Yaakov was basically sending a message. Not only didn't the mother you get, but not even her daughter. Let's remember. What did Rashi tell us 2 parashiyot ago? Rashi told us that people used to say, right? This was the Dvar Ha'olam. Let the older marry the older. It's the famous midrash. And let the younger marry the younger. And this is the reason why the Einayim of Leah was rakot. Why was she crying, says Rashi? Because she was told that she was destined to marry Esav. So now she marries the Gadol Hador. She marries Yaakov Avinu. So now here comes Esav and says, listen, the mother was supposed to be mine. Yaakov, you chapped. You got her. You took the Bechorah. you took the double portion. Not only in the Berachot, but even in the wives. You took both. You took the Bechorah. You took now 2 wives. You took a double portion. The way a Bechor takes. So now at least let me have the daughter. The mother was destined for me. I didn't get the mother. But now, at least I should get the daughter. Yaakov knew that Esav was going to come with this ta'ana. When it says that Esav was looking at the women, you know who he was looking for? He was looking for Dina, Rabotai. It wasn't that he was looking at the women and haphazardly he might have spotted Dina and said, oh, that's the one. No. No, there's a certain destiny going on here. And Yaakov Avinu was ready to play with that destiny. The way he debunked the destiny in the mother's play of round 1, he was ready to do it again by the daughter in round 2. Says Chazal, he put her in a box. Esav couldn't find her. And because of that, Esav kind of went on to a different game plan, where maybe not the women was he looking at, now he was looking at the money, now he was looking at the shvachot, now he was looking at the children. He asks Yaakov, who are all these? He was going to a different plan now. He was coming from the ayin of not watching his eyes to the ayin of ayin hara. He was looking, wow, look what you have. Look how much you have. Look how much wealth. Look how much children. Look how many wives. You see the game plan, what he's doing here. Yaakov Avinu says, Hakome et Hashem. We learned the technique that any time somebody is giving you the ayin and they're overly praising what you have, and you begin to smell a little bit of the jealousy moving in, quickly, what do? You deflect it completely to Borei Olam. Where did we get this from? From Yaakov Avinu, this week's parasha. Because how does ayin hara work? When a person looks at you and says, wow, look what this guy has. And inside they start asking themselves, how come him and not me? How does that work? At that moment, the person puts a certain spotlight on the person they're looking at, and they start to salivate by the mouth, and they say, look how much this guy has. How come I don't have it? And at that minute, they throw judgment on the person they're looking at. Because when this person starts asking, how come this guy has and I don't? Shamayim starts to investigate. Hey, how come Be'emet this guy has more than other people? Does he deserve it? And they start to open the books. And who can possibly stand in the microscope of Shamayim? Nobody. Who could stand in such judgment? Nobody. Obviously, everything we have are all matanot from Borei Olam. It's all matnat hinam. It's not because we deserve, it's because He loves us. It's because Borei Olam says, keep the books closed. I don't want to look. Give him, he's my son. Yeah, give him more, it's okay. But the minute they put ayin hara on a person, they open the books, they put the spotlight. They want to see now, is the guy really deserving of what he has or not? So what do? Immediately you say, Hakome et Hashem. I don't deserve any of it. It's all Yishtabach Shemo La'ad. It's all Borei Olam's Rahmanut. Ooh, you know what you just did? You know what you just did by saying that? At that moment, you deflected the entire judgment process. Because at that moment, you're basically announcing and unequivocally saying, it's not me. I don't deserve it. If you're going to bring measurement of judgment on me, I won't stand. But you should know this is all matanom min hashamayim. Oh, Bedin Shamala hears that. Oh, so this guy knows he doesn't deserve it. So this guy understands that this isn't coming to him. He understands that this is Rahameh Shamayim. He already deflected all the credit to Borei Olam's mercy, Hesed, and it's not me, and I don't deserve it. At that moment, they say, okay, so what's there to look? We're trying to look up the books to see if he deserves. Hodad Baldim K'mei Eidim Dami. He already was modeh that he doesn't deserve. At that minute, they close the books. But this was Esav's diabolical plan. He went from Arayot, Vayaret HaNashim, to Ayin Hara. Wow, look what you have. Because he couldn't find the one he was looking for. Esav was looking for Dina. And Yaakov Avinu would never consider it. Says Chazal, Yaakov, maybe Dina would have turned him around. Maybe Dina would have been Machzir Esav B'tshuva. Wow, that's a tall order. That's a tall order. And because of this, Chazal said there was a ta'ana on Yaakov Avinu. Because he hid Dina. Because maybe she would have married Esav. And she would have mamash turned him around. Such a tzaddiket. And because of that, there was a ta'ana on Yaakov Avinu. Rabbi, how do you understand this? A ta'ana on Yaakov Avinu? Because he didn't allow his daughter to be looked at by Rasha Berusha, the guy who was mamash, the representative of the Samach Mem. Do you know Rabbi Yonatan ben Uziel writes, when Yaakov Avinu and Esav came out from their mother's womb in Parashat Toldot, Yonatan ben Uziel writes over there that when Esav came out, on his thigh there was a inscription of a snake, to demonstrate that Yaakov and Esav, which are going to be now the Tikkun of Adam Arishon, Yaakov took all the good of Adam, and Esav took all the bad of Adam. Esav took the snake portion, meaning the chet. We're basically making, you learned a little bit Hilchot Shabbat, you learned Borer, you know the concept of what it means to remove the psolet from the ochel. This is the reason why they were born as twins. Why twins? Rivka could have had 2 kids. She could have one first. 9 months later, no, that would not have worked. It had to be twins. It had to be one entity that now budded into 2. Literally splitting every chromosome down the middle, where one baby took all the good and the other baby took all the bad. Because the Avot HaKdoshim, they were here to continuously be mitaken Adam Arishon. So Yaakov took all the good of Adam. Esav took all the bad. What bad of Adam did Esav take? The Nahash. The forbidden. The Nahash, and what he ate, the sin. All went to Esav. You want to give your daughter to that? On the tzad of what? Maybe she'll turn him around. Maybe she won't. Ein safek, motzi mideh, vadai. And yet there was a ta'ana at Yaakov Avinu. He didn't give Dina to Esav. What's pshat? Rabotai, listen to me well. What you're going to hear tonight, I'm telling you straight up. This is something that I decided to give this share tonight because I mentioned I was moving, and I am sitting at home upon piles and piles of boxes. I have no svarim and very little Yishuv Hadat because bli ayin hara, to move is a tremendous nisayon, right? You and the wife, gewaldig. So at the end of the day, I'm hoping that Borei Olam gives this to us as a major bailout. So Vatetze Dina. So Dina goes out, and she goes to the city of Shechem. And Shechem ben Chamor puts his eyes on her and does something terrible to her. Dina, you're Bat Yaakov. You're a Beis Yaakov girl, literally. You're the first Beis Yaakov girl. You're Bat Yaakov. Why are you going out to tour? What are you going out to see? Who are you going out to look? This is not the way of Benot Yisrael. Where are you going? Dina, where are you going? To Shechem, from all places. Rabotai, she must have been after something. She didn't go out just to spatzir, to tour. No way. You have to, who are we talking about here? We're talking here about Bat Yaakov. We're talking here about Shivteka. Don't you dare humanize them. Don't you dare. We're talking about the daughter of Yaakov Avinu. Do you know what it means to be the daughter of Yaakov Avinu? Do you know what it means to be the son of Yaakov Avinu? Did you already forget from last week's parasha? Last week's parasha, we went through that tremendous class. The night that Leah and Rachel were switched under the chuppah. When did Yaakov Avinu find out about the switch? The next morning. The next morning, says the Torah, Yaakov Avinu, so to speak, gets up. V'hineh Leah. What? The next morning? V'hineh Leah, what surprise? The next morning? Yeah. If you know who Yaakov Avinu is, and we would never know. We would never chap the level b'kedusha, b'tahora. When Yaakov Avinu came to his Maaseh Zivug, he came with unbelievable yirat shamayim. He came trembling to do a mitzvah. He came b'kedusha v'tahora. He came with his eyes closed, with his kavanot, mamash. He was looking for the right neshama to bring down to the world, to start the Shivteka. Reuven, Bechori ata, Kochi, V'reshit oni. Do you understand what that means? When your minds are in the heaven, your body is just going through the motions. But where was Yaakov Avinu when he brought down children to this world? He was in Shemei Shamayim. Do you think he was anywhere other than that when he brought Dina down to the world? That means Dina was Kodesh Kodashim. This isn't a girl that decided to one day pick up and go to the mall because she had nothing to do. Don't you dare humanize this story. These are Gidolei Elyon. So what's Pshat? We gotta rewrite this story tonight. Not the way it was written. It was written already perfect. But we gotta rewrite it for us. From the way we learnt it. It was meant and demanded to be higher. Be bigger. Let's look at the story bigger. Vatetze Dina. You know why Dina went out? Because she was after something. She was on a mission. She was looking for something. Dina, ma'at mechapeset. What are you looking for? What are you going out to find? Ma'at mechapeset in the city of Shechem. What is it that you're looking for? Rabotai, open your hearts. You have to hear this. Who sees her? Shechem ben Chamor. Do you know the way the Torah calls when it introduces to you this particular guy, this Rasha, Shechem ben Chamor? There's one more word that the Torah adds. Vayar ota. And he saw her. Shechem ben Chamor ha-chivi. Ha-chivi simply means from the Chivi people. But the word chivi in Aramaic, in Gemara language, chivya is a snake. Everyone who ever learned any of the sugyot, every time the Gemara says a story about a snake, chivya is a snake. So that means this is Shechem ben Chamor ha-chivya, the snake. He comes directly from the Nahash HaKadmoni. This guy is the embodiment of the Nahash, of the snake. What is the snake doing here in this story? And what does this have to do with Dina? Rabotai, open your hearts. We got to go back to the beginning on this one, because they all go back to the beginning. Adam Arishon is told by Borei Olam, Adam, you're in Gan Eden. It's all yours. Everything but one tree. Adam knows the forbidden. Chava goes out. She's bringing back food because his job was le'ovda ul-shomra. Says the Targum, le'ovda ul-shomra was referring to Torah u'mitzvot. He was sitting and learning in Gan Eden. He didn't have to pick up a pinky. The angels were serving him. The Nachash was his butler running for him on anything he needed. His wife went out to bring the food, to bring back. And clearly she was seduced. And clearly she fell into sin. And she brought back from the Etz Hada'at, from the forbidden, and brings it to Adam HaRishon. At the minute, Rabotai, listen to me well, at the minute that Adam ingested the Isur, the forbidden from what he wasn't allowed to eat, the Chet, the Koach HaTum'ah went inside of him. And you know what happened at that moment? The Yetzer Hara had access to the master neshama of all of Klal Yisrael. And at that moment, when it entered Adam, it was able, the Yetzitra Hara, the Samach Mem, was able to grab away many of the great and very special future giant neshamot that were destined to come out in later generations in Klal Yisrael. Many of these neshamot were called the Shevi neshamot. Do you know when we got these neshamot finally back? These neshamot were kidnapped by the Nahash, by the Samach Mem, by the Yetzer Hara, by the dark side. These were great, great, great neshamot that were literally kidnapped and held hostage by the Koach HaTum'ah for many years. When did we get these neshamot back? You wouldn't believe it. Alita Lamarom. We say the Pizmon on Yom Tov. Alita Lamarom. Who's Alita Lamarom? Moshe Rabbeinu. He went up to Marom. He went up to Shamayim to get the Torah. Alita Lamarom. How does it go? Alita Lamarom. Shavita Shevi. Oh, Lakachta Matanot Libnei Adam. That's the pasuk. Nachon Jack. Alita Lamarom. Shavita Shevi. Lakachta Matanot Libnei Adam. Alita Lamarom. Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Shamayim to get the Torah. And you know what happened? Shavita Shevi, he saw that there was hostage, Shevi. All these neshamot that was stolen from Klal Yisrael, great future giants, at the time that Adam HaRishon sinned. Because Adam HaRishon was the master neshama of all of the future neshamot of the Jewish people. Some say even of mankind, but definitely of Klal Yisrael. And because of that, the dark side stole these neshamot at the time of the sin and held hostage for hundreds of years. We're talking here about Matan Torah, Shavita Shevi. Moshe saw that there in hostage were the neshamot called Shevi. And he got them back. Lakachta matanot la'adam. The angels gave these neshamot as presents to Klal Yisrael on Matan Torah. Matan Torah was the wedding. Weddings, you give presents. There's a chatan, there's a kala. The angel said, Klal Yisrael, we are going to go and give you back as presents all those neshamot that were stolen from you. Who are these neshamot? Shevi. Who's Shevi? Who's Shevi? Who isn't Shevi? Shevi, Shin Bet Yud, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, was stolen from us. We got him back by Matan Torah. Who else is Shevi? Shlomo Ben Yitzhaki. You heard of him? It's Rashi. Can you imagine? We lost Rashi. We got Rashi back by Matan Torah. He was stolen. Right? Could you imagine? Think about this. Shevi, backwards. Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. He was stolen from... Yetzer Hara knew exactly who to grab. He knew he was chapping the master of Sod, Kabbalah. He was chapping the master of Pshat, Rashi. He was chapping the master of Hasidut, the Baal Shem. He was chapping the heads of all the categories that later on would be Klal Yisrael. And he was trying to knock them down from early, from the beginning of creation. He already had his eyes on these key neshamot. All these neshamot, and there were many of them. I'm just a few examples, but many, many Shevi neshamot. Could you imagine that when Moshe Rabbeinu brought down the Torah from Shamayim to Klal Yisrael, it came down with Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's neshama, with Rashi's neshama, with Rabbi Sol Baal Shem Tov's neshama. They came down. Those were the matanot that escorted the Torah to Klal Yisrael as Moshe brought it from Shamayim to Klal Yisrael to Har Sinai. That's unbelievable. I hope you already got your money's worth for tonight. For tonight. This is unbelievable. That's off the charts. There were other nishamot that were stolen as well, not just the Shevi nishamot. Many of the great men, including those of the Asara Harugei Malchut, were also stolen. The great Tana, Reb Hananya ben Tradion, he was stolen. And he was hidden. Says the Arizal, says the Megaleh Amukot. You know where he was hidden by? You know where he was hidden? By the Yetzer Hara? So no one should find the nitzots of his neshama, so that Klal Yisrael will never be able to bring him back. He was placed in Shechem. And you know where he was placed in Shechem? In Shechem ben Chamor. In the Chivi. The snake. This is one of the snake's men. He's Mikoach, the Sitra Hara. So they put him in, they put the nitzots of this great future rabbi, Reb Hananya ben Tradion. They put his nitzots neshama inside this Rasha, Shechem ben Chamor. And you will hear something amazing. Dina knew it. Dina knew al pi ruach hakodesh that in this city over here there is the nitzots of a future great gadol batorah. I got to get him back. Vatetze Dina. Dina went out to war. She didn't go out to tour. She went out to war. You have to understand, this was a reconnaissance mission. She was going out to break out hostages and bring them home. That's what Tetzeh Dina. She went out to chap neshamot. Dina was a powerhouse. You have to understand something. Dina was a master, powerful, unbelievable force of kiruv that was able to go out and capture neshamot in the darkest of places on earth and somehow brilliantly bring him back home. Ki ima bita. Like mother, like daughter. Do you think it was a stam coincidence that Leah was to marry Esav? No. Ki ima bita. You know where Dina got this powerful talent and koach from? From her mother. Her mother had the koach to go out and chap neshamot and bring them back. And that's why Leah was originally destined to marry Esav. It wasn't to, God forbid, put her in a position that would undermine her avodat HaKodesh. No! She was born with the kalim to be a powerful master of kiruv, to go out and be makarev even at Esav. Talking about a kid that went off the derech. She had his number. But she cried, and she cried, and she cried, and she said, I want a life of gadlut batorah. I know that you gave me kochot. I know you gave me great kochot to do this work, but I want to do this work. And how this works, I don't know, but in Shamayim, through the amazing power of tefillah, Shared Dma'ot Lo Nin'alu. She was crying and crying. They answered her. They allowed her to go to Yaakov, the Gadol Ador. Unbelievable. So who's going to take over her job? Dina, her daughter. Ki'ima, Bita. How do I know this? Because Vatetse Leah, that night, last parasha, when Leah runs out to the field to meet Yaakov as he's coming home and to tell Yaakov, Yaakov, tonight you're by me in my tent because we bartered. Rachel took the flowers and I took her night instead. Tonight you're by me. That night she conceived. Leah had another son. Who'd she have? Yisachar. Yisachar, Chamor Garem. What's a Chamor Garem? The Chamor was Gorem that he should become, that he should be in the world. Anybody who learned a little bit of the beginning of Masechet Berachot, you know that there are 3 mishmarot. There's 3 mishmarot, that the night is split into 3 parts. The first third, the second third, and the last third. The middle third was the Chamor when he neighs. At the time that the Chamor neighs, or brays, I believe is the proper English word, when the donkey brays, when it brays, when it does that sound that it does. That's the time of night that belongs to the Chamor. Leah went out, brought Yaakov to her tent, and at the moment, the middle of the night that the Chamor brayed, was the moment that the mitzvah was done. Yisachar was just conceived. Hence, Yisachar, Chamor Garem. It was the moment of the Chamor that you were Geirim to be brought into this world. Take a look at Leah. She had this Ruach HaKodesh. She knew how to chap neshamot. She knew how to bring in neshamot. She was able to bring neshamot into the world. But instead of bringing neshamot back, she was able to bring neshamot in. And again, let's remind ourselves, which neshamot? She wanted the neshamot of Torah. That's why she pushed away the neshamot of Tshuva, Esav. And she went for the neshamot of Torah, Yaakov, the Gadol Hador. So now who does she get? The neshamot that she signed up for. Who does she bring into the world? Yisachar. Yisachar, no. Yisachar Zevulun. Yisachar is the Ben Taira, is the one that's learning. He's a Torah giant. Yisachar, Chamor Garem. Ki'ima bita. Like mother, like daughter. The mother knows how to bring the neshamot back. The daughter knows how to bring the neshamot back. The mother knows how to chap neshamot. The daughter knows how to chap neshamot. That's why last week's parasha, Vatetse Leah, she went out to get neshamot. This week's parasha, Vatetse Dina, she also went out to get neshamot. Don't you dare think for 1 minute that she went out touring, spaziering, shopping. No. Don't humanize giants of Kiddushei Elyon. This is a Bas Yisrael. This is a Bet Yaakov girl. This is Bat Yaakov, Kodesh Kodashim. She was on a reconnaissance mission. She went out to bust out the hostages and bring them back to Klal Yisrael. Al Pi Ruach HaKodesh, she knew right here in this city of Shechem, there is the soul, the Nitzotz, of Hananiah ben Tradion. And I got to save him. And she was looking for him. And suddenly she spots him. And she couldn't believe where she found him. She found the Nitzotz of one of the greatest rabbis, hidden inside one of the biggest Rishaim. In Shechem ben Chamor, she finds the Nitzotz of the great Reb Hananiah ben Tradion. Hachivi. Oh, makes sense now. Because he's from the snake. The snake chopped him. The snake hostaged him, kidnapped him, and the snake placed him in one of his. Like this, no one will find him there. Who would look for the giant Gadol Hador in the embodiment of the biggest Russia? Who would look? But Dina caught it. Vatetse Dina. And that's why Dina went and gave him eyes. Yeah. Dina was on a mission, Rabotai. You have to understand what we're dealing with here. I know, forgive me, I know that this topic is not, it's age sensitive. And I'm asking Borei Olam to give me the right words to say this like a Ben Torah, Yirat Shamayim. But Dina, you think Shechem found Dina? Dina found Shechem ben Chamor. She was looking for him because little did he know what he was carrying. And she wanted it back. And there's only one way to draw it out of him. She's going to marry him. And al yidei the maaseh, she'll be able to pull out from him the nitzot of the great Reb Chananya ben Tradion and bring him back to Klal Yisrael. That was her strategy. That was her game plan. Do you understand what we're dealing with here, Rabotai? This is not this is not the story we grew up with. Al pi Kabbalah, this is where they're hitting this. Al pi the Zohar, al pi the Ari, Megale Amukot, they all go into this amazing behind-the-scenes story. So, wait one second. So what went wrong? Something took a very, very bad turn in this story. She wanted to marry him. And instead, he turned around and he was ma'anes her. Rasha! Ma'anes her. What happened? Rabotai, open your hearts and listen to what I'm about to tell you now. But by the way, before I go on to tell you this piece, I think you already understand why there was a taina on Yaakov Avinu for hiding her from Esav. If she was such a powerhouse, that she went in on such a mission kacha like this alone, just to bring back the Neshama ben Tradion, just to overcome such a rasha, then this Dina was something out of this world. She got the kochot from her mother. And I want to tell you something bigger. Who is in Klal Yisrael, who is the antithesis of Esav? Who's the one of the Shvatim that was given by Yaakov the blessing that you will be the one to beat Esav? Yosef! Very good, Jack. Yosef was compared to Lehava, and he was Kash. Together, you burn him to pieces. Esav cannot do that. That's why we have two Mashiach. Do you know that? Mashiach ben David, Mashiach ben Yosef. Because the final Galut is going to be a Galut of two nations, not one nation. We're going to be in Galut of Esav and Galut of Yishmael. Mashiach ben Yosef is needed to be able to overcome Esav in the final generation. Mashiach ben David is the Ani Harochev ala Chamor. Am Hadome Lechamor, that is Yishmael. So Mashiach ben David is going to knock out Yishmael. Mashiach ben Yosef is knocking out Esav. Because in the last generation, right before Mashiach comes, as we see today in a world that we live in, we are subjugated to both the superpowers of the East and the West of the world. Klal Yisrael suffering from both of them. We're in a double jeopardy galut, in a double header galut. Hence, we need two Mashiach. So who's the antithesis of Esav? Yosef. Do you know that the Midrash says that really Yosef was in the stomach of Leah and Dina was in the stomach of Rachel? And then Leah made the cheshbon. If she's going to have another boy, then the numbers of the Shvatim will be of such that Rachel will have less than even the Shvachot, would be such a busha for a wife like Rachel, leumat the maidservant wives, that would have more than a main wife. In order not to embarrass Rachel, Leah davens that the boy inside her, Yosef, jumps over to the stomach of Rachel. And the girl inside Rachel jumps over to the stomach of Leah. Take a look, there is a connection between Leah, Dina, and Yosef. These two are interchangeable. Why she was supposed to marry Esav? She was Mikoach Yosef. Yosef was the antithesis of Esav. Yosef was the one who's going to bring down Esav. Leah and Esav are interchangeable. Dina and Esav are interchangeable. Therefore, Dina was able to bring down Yosef. Yaakov, why are you scared? She could have been Choser and B'tshuva, Chik-chak, B'kalut. She had his number. She had the koach. She was able to be Machzir anybody B'tshuva. That was Dina, the powerhouse. Vatetzeh Dina. When she went out, nothing stopped her. Ki ima bita. She was the power of Yosef. Yosef brings down the house of Esav. Dina brings down the house of Esav. And that's why there was a ta'ana on Yaakov. Why did you put her in the box? She would have brought Esav back. She would have mamash made mincemeat out of him. He had no shot against him. Vatetzeh Dina. Look what she's able to do. She's able to go on reconnaissance missions to bring back the soul of Reb Hananya ben Tradion, which is embodied in the Nachash's offspring itself. Who? Shechem ben Chamo. So now she knows her mission. She goes to Shechem. And like I said, it wasn't him looking for her, it was her looking for him. And she sees, oh, there it is. There is the nitzotz of the great Reb Hananya ben Tradion. I gotta bring it back to Klal Yisrael. I gotta save him. I gotta pull him out from this Russia. What does she do? She begins to make eyes at him. She begins to warm up to him. She wanted to marry him in order to draw it back to Klal Yisrael. But then something went very, very wrong. He was ma'anis her. Why was he ma'anis her? She was willing to come to him willingly. She was willing to marry him willingly. You Rasha, you dirty Rasha. Why you ma'anis a girl? Rabotai. I don't know if we're going to be able to put on the seatbelts for this tonight. Chevra, listen to me. And don't expect this again next week. This only happens when I move. I have to bring back the shofar. Okay. Says the Arizal. And we find this in the Megalei Amokot as well. And this is brought also in the Sefer Gilgulim. Dina was a Gilgul of the mother of Abraham Avinu. Uh-oh. Let's try that again. Bear with me just 1 second, Chevra, because we're having technical difficulties. See, when you hit the big stuff, just bear with me 1 second, Rabotai. Forgive me for the delay. Einoid Mulvadai. Okay. Pulchana Delikut Shabrecha. Okay. So let's take that from the top again. Forgive me for the... wow, Yitzhar is really fighting me. It says limited bandwidth. It's an internet issue, yeah. Let me see if I can just try this one more time. Yes, I know. They're emailing me now off the charts that the thing went off. I know the thing went off. Yeah. You have hardwire, yeah?
I mean, internet jack and hardwire.
Yeah, okay, thank you. That would be a great help.
One in the car.
Pulchana delikut shabricha. Oh, it went. That's what happens when you start on this line. So forgive me again for the break of action and the delay. I hope we're back on. But nonetheless, something went wrong. Something went wrong. Dina comes now to Shechem ben Chamor. She knows her mission. She knows what it is that she's after. She's after the nitzotz of Reb Hananya ben Tradion that's inside the Rasha. And now she's actually warming up to him. She's ready to marry him. And then he turns around and he's ma'anes her, this Rasha. She's ready to marry you willingly. Why you ma'anes her? Rabbotai, open your hearts, listen to this. Says the Arizal HaKadosh, and it's brought in the Sefer HaGilgulim. Dina, she was the Gilgul of the mother of Abraham Avinu, Amtalia bat Karnavo. And this is amazing. You have to know something about Amtalia bat Karnavo. Wow, we're going to go with this. Amtalia bat Karnavo was guilty for being machshil her husband Terach in relations of nida. She would literally not be careful on purpose to be with her husband specifically in times of nida, to be machshil him. And what's amazing is, Chazal tell us, in those years, these concepts were somewhat of a given. It was kind of understood from before Torah was given that there was a concept of the clean days of a woman's cycle and the not clean days. And the world was noheg al pi their own understanding. That they were there together with their husbands in the times that they were clean. Amtalia bat Karnavo breached the laws of Nida. And because of that, she was machshil her husband Terach in relations mitoch tumah. There was no purity of the home there. Abraham Avinu was actually born out of a matziv of tumah, of nida. And that's why he was destined to be thrown in the fire. Because how are you machshir a keli? Guys, I don't know. I don't know where we're going with it. I'm telling you, I hope you brought coffee tonight. We might end up doing a Shavuot night tonight. Once we start with this topic, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. She was machshil Terach, and she had Abraham. And because of that, like we said, when the keli has tumah in it, what do? You do hagalah. You do havara. You put it in fire. You burn out the tumah. Abraham Avinu was destined to be thrown into the fire. Yes, it demonstrated Kiddush Hashem. Yes, it demonstrated the Nisim and Flaot of Borei Olam. But there was a plan behind the plan to be machshir Abraham as the first of the Ivri of Avinu of Klal Yisrael. We had to burn out from him that tum'ah that came al yedei nida. That was Amtalia bat Karnavo. Amtalia bat Karnavo, her sin was nida. And because of that, she was brought back as Dina. Otiot nida. Wow. And because Amtalia bat Karnavo sinned in relations, her tikkun was to have to go through this horrifying situation through relations. Mida keneged mida. Unbelievable. In order to be mitaken, the illicit relations mitoch nida, she came back as Dina, Otiyot, Nida, and fell to the hands of this Rasha, where she offered herself willingly. But the tikkun was that he punished her with relations. He was ma'anis her. Vayaneha, says the pasuk. He was ma'aneha. He pained her instead as a tikkun for that terrible sin that she brought her husband to. Terach, on the other hand, because of those relations of Nida, came back as Iyov. Job, Iyov was a Gilgul of Terach. Iyov went through all Isurei. I mean, I don't have to tell you. The Isurim that Iyov, what Isurim didn't he go through? He went through every possible terrible Isurim in the world. Iyov. Why? Because Chazal tell us Isurim is fire. It literally burns a person in their bones. And therefore, because the Avon was Nida, which is Tumah, Srefa, so this was the way, through the Isurim, he comes back as Iyov. So here the parents of Abraham Avinu, Amtalya bat Karnevo and Terach, in illicit relations, and they were nichshal in the laws of Nida, Taharat HaMishpacha. Everyone needed tikkun, everyone. Amtalya needed tikkun through Dina, Otiyot Nida, and that's why she was ma'anis. Terach needed tikkun, comes back as Iyov, goes through a lifetime of terrible Yisurim. Terrible Yisurim. And sure enough, Abraham Avinu, who was the product that came out of those illicit Tum'ah relations, and he was literally machshir al yedei esh, literally put into the fire. And that's why some hold the Torah doesn't talk about the story of the Kivshana Esh in Kasdim. It's only hinted to as Ur Kasdim, so not to publicize the fact that the great Abraham Avinu started out from such a unbelievable. Because otherwise, you would expect that story to be plastered over the front page of every parasha. The first Jew that jumped into the fire, Al Yidei Kiddush Hashem. I mean, come on. That's where our DNA comes from. In the Spanish Inquisition, how many Jews jumped into the fire, Al Yidei Kiddush Hashem, right in front of the cardinal and the bishop, screaming Shema Yisrael? How were they able to do that? Because Abraham Avinu. Isn't that a story you want to publicize? No. Because it might bring someone to say shame. Abraham came from that type of a relationship. Because of that, the Torah. Okay. We just hint to the concept. But he was machshir al yedei esh. This is unbelievable. So now, Rabotai, listen to what happened. Dina goes in on reconnaissance mission. She finds the soul of Hananya ben Tradinitzotz, or Hananya ben Tradion, in the Russia, Chamor ben Shechem. Shechem ben Chamor, rather. Hachivi, from the snake. And she offers herself to him. And instead he's ma'anis her. And like this, Amtalya bat Karnevo got her tikkun. But Rabotai, listen to me. Tosafot in Ketubot writes that most of the time, a girl who is betula doesn't conceive the first night of her wedding. And again, I beg you, forgive me, I know I should have mentioned in the beginning of the share that this is an age-sensitive class. I should have mentioned it, but I told you I'm in the middle of moving. My head is on the boxes. I still see boxes with little Chinese guys. We hired this Chinese company to move us. 8 guys show up. I asked the first guy, where in China you come from? He tells me, Wuhan. I said, oh, very nice, very nice. You should have whacked them in the back of the head. Jokers. Anyways, so that's where my head is. But this is age sensitive, so if there are kids watching it, let's break for station identification. But Rabotai, in all truth, listen to this, is incredible. So she goes now to Shechem ben Chamor, and she offers herself to get the nitzotz out from him. And instead he's ma'anes her. Says Tosafot in Ketubot that most of the time a girl who's Betulah, she does not conceive the first time she's together with her husband. Because most of the Zerah, says Tosafot, is used up only through breaking the door. That's what he writes. And because of that, although he was Ma'anes her, but she said to herself, because she was Betulah, probably she did not succeed yet at being able to bring out the Neshama of Hananiah ben Tradion. Because she was Betulah, she was Kodesh Kodashim, she was Ba Israel. So she was chayshid that it didn't happen yet. I didn't get it yet. I didn't have success on the mission. I didn't bring back the hostage. And that's why when Shimon shows up to the castle, did you ever ask yourself this? You heard this as kids, but we never understood. Shimon shows up to the castle. Shimon v'Levi Achim. Shimon v'Levi, when they heard what happened to their sister, Ki nivala asa b'Yisrael, they went out and they turned the city upside down. They wiped out the city. And then they come now to break the princess out of the tower. They come now to take their sister back. And what does Chazal tell us? Dina did not want to go with them. So the Parsha Pshat we always were told over the years was, she said, such an embarrassing thing happened to me. Who would want to marry me? Yes, that is the Parsha Pshat. And Shimon stood up and he said, no, I'm going to marry you. And that's meant what took place. Okay, Yofi. But we have a much bigger Pshat. And I have a proof to this Pshat. Because in the Pasuk it says, Vaye'aneha. Vaye'aneha means that not only was he with her, but he was ma'anes her. Vaye'aneha, he pained her. He tortured her. Shechem ben Chamor tortured her. That's Pasha Pshat. That's not the Gemara's Pshat. The Gemara says, Vaye'aneha, says the Gemara. Rashi says this, al derech. Rashi says, Shelo kedarka. But the Gemara says, Vaye'aneha, you know what it means? He held back from her tashmish. The opposite of what you thought. He held back from her relations. That means that she came back a second time. Vaye'aneha. And he pained her by not giving her a second relations. Why would she come back a second time? He was ma'anes her. He was ma'anes her. She would come back to Shechem ben Chamor to be tortured like that a second time? You know what she was thinking? I didn't have success yet. Because the first time I was Betulah. And because of that, the first time, it generally doesn't take place. So she came back a second time and said, let me up the chance that now I'll conceive from him and I'll get back the nitzotz of Rabbi Hananiah ben Tradion. Vaye'aneha. And he said, no. He realized something's wrong. Mashu lo besed. Who comes back a second time after the torture? He said, wait 1 second. She's up to something. He chapped that there's a bigger plan than just her coming to marry him. She's after something. And that's why he said, no, I got to find out what you're after. I'm not coming near you again. Comes Shimon into the castle. And Shimon says, Dina, we wiped out the city, let's go. She said, no, my mission is not done yet. I don't know if I got back to Nitzotz of Rabbi Hananiah ben Tradion. I got to stay here until I know I got it. Because Vaye'aneha, he wasn't with me a second time. And the first time is too unlikely to rely on. Because she was Betulah. This is too much. Shimon said, no. He's supposed to come from me. Reb Hananya ben Tradion was from Shevet Shimon. He's supposed to come from me. I'm taking the achrayut that we have him back. That's what it means, I'm going to marry you. It means that it's my Shevet. And with those words, she said, you're taking achrayut? I'm out. She took her out. And what ended up happening? Chevra, listen to me. What ended up happening? Turns out that she did have success. She did conceive. And then she was pregnant from the ones. And through that she was pregnant from conceiving from the first time with Shechem ben Chamor. She actually got back the nitzotz, Reb Hananya ben Tradion. And Shechem knew she was up to something. And I'll prove it to you in the pasuk. Not just Vaya'anea, that he wouldn't be with her again, chapping that she was up to something. But listen to these words. Shechem ben Chamor, and Chamor himself stands up in front of the people of Shechem when Shimon and Levi was pitching the idea that everyone in Shechem does Brit Milah so that we can give you our daughters and you can give us your daughters. So they get up to tell everyone to do Brit Milah. Listen to this pasuk. You'll see what you never saw before. Says Shechem ben Chamor and Chamor of Shechem to the people of Shechem. Ha'anashim ha'eleh. These people of Bnei Yaakov, shilemim hem itanu. They are complete, perfect, super people with us. V'yeshvu ba'aretz. And now they want to come and settle in our land, Shechem. V'yischaru ota. V'ha'aretz. And our land, you know what they're after in our land? You know what's good about our land? That they're here? Hine rechavat yadayim lifnehem. Now, at first glance, it sounds like it's a large, beautiful. No, rechavat yadayim. You know why their hands here? Rechavat. Rechavat Rashi Tevot. Rabbi Hananya ben Tradion. He's by yadayim. He's in our hands, and that's why they're here, because they're shalemim, and they're missing something. The Shalemut is missing something. Klal Yisrael is missing the great Tana, Reb Hananya ben Tradion. So they're here. They're looking for him. While we got him, let's grab him. That's what Shechem ben Chamor ben Shechem was telling him. Hine rechavat yadayim. They're after Reb Hananya ben Tradion. And he's biyadenu. And they're not going to get him. So while they're here, let's take advantage of them. Let's grab them. Let's take their daughters. Let's take their wealth. Let's take their prosperity. Let's take their shleimut. Ay, 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 ay. She was on a mission. Unbelievable. Vatetze Dina. Ma ima yatzanit. Af bita yatzanit. Yeah, she could have turned Esav around. Dina was a powerhouse. She was mibchinat Yosef. Yosef was Moshel. She was Moshel. And guess what? Yosef was Moshel Mitzrayim. Dina was supposed to be Moshel Esav. Unbelievable. This is much. Too much. And sure enough, her mission was a success, although she didn't know it at first. And she did conceive. And she did bring back Reb Hananya ben Tradion to Klal Yisrael. And she had a baby, a girl. And they named the baby Osnat. Al Shem HaOnes. That she was Ma'anes. And the Shvatim, says Chazal, hated this baby. This baby was a stain on the family's reputation. Says Chazal that the brothers went and took the baby and threw the baby behind the bushes to die, to get rid of it, to put this bad story in their past. Ki nevala asabi Yisrael, the tumah of the Goyim breached the Kiddusha of Klal Yisrael. Get rid of it. We have to even look at it. We have to be reminded by it. Get it out of here. They threw the baby behind the bushes to die. Yaakov Avinu, out of his tremendous rahmanut, he saw that this baby was in danger. They were trying to kill the baby. He went and took an amulet and he put it around the neck of this little baby girl. And on the amulet it said, Bat Yisrael. That's what it said, Bat Yisrael. And then an angel came, Malach Michael, and he picked up the baby and he brought the baby to Mitzrayim. And he put the baby on the doorstep of none other than Eshet Potiphar. Wow, Hashem does things. How Borei Olam does things is unbelievable. Why Eshet Potiphar? Well, number one, Potiphar himself was a Kohen. In Egypt, the Kohanim were also not attracted to women. Let's just leave it at that. That's why he bought Yosef, such a good-looking boy. Shema Yisrael. Shema Yisrael. They had no children. So they adopted this baby, Eshet Potiphar, adopted this little girl, not knowing Meimi, Meima, Meimu, Efo, where did she come from? She was literally put there on the... Later on, when Yosef is sold down to Mitzrayim, Yosef knows that he was being brought up in the same house as his niece. Again, do you see the connection between Dina and Yosef? How they keep coming back to each other. They're interchangeable, guys. You have to see the genius of Borei Olam here. This isn't stam kaka. These things just don't happen. This was a brilliant strategic plan of Borei Olam. One day, Yosef is going to be brought down to Mitzrayim, the only Jew in Egypt. Talking about a shidduch crisis. The only Jew in Egypt. Who's going to marry? Who's he going to marry? So Borei Olam already put the refuah before the makkah. He already put down Bat Dina, Osnat, into Egypt. Not just into Egypt. In the same house that Yosef is going to be brought up. Unbelievable. And that's what Chazal tell us. When Yosef was appointed viceroy of Egypt, and they paraded him through the street, says the pasuk, Banot Sa'ada Ale Shor. The women, the girls, used to hang over the rafters just to see him. Says the Midrash, they wanted Yosef to turn their direction just to get a glimpse. So they would take all their jewelry and throw it on him to get him to react, to turn, to look at them for a minute, even for a minute. Banot Sa'ada? That's not grammatically correct. It's supposed to be Banot Sa'adu, in plural. Banot, many girls. Sa'adu ale shor. No. Banot, many. Sa'ada, but only one captured him. Only one girl. And who was that? Osnat. How did she do it? She took off the amulet that Yaakov Avinu gave her as a baby. And when she threw her jewelry on Yosef, Yosef catches this amulet, and what does it say on it? Bat Yisrael. Bat Yisrael. In Egypt. Efo. Bat Yisrael. Here. In Egypt. Efo. Oh. Osnat. Bat Dina. The one girl and the only Jewish bachelor, I don't use that word, I don't like that word, but the only Jewish bacher, better, and there it was. This should give people chizuk. People out there saying, Rabbi, I've been dating for so long, come on. I don't believe there's anyone out there. Listen to me. Whatever chances you think you don't have, Yosef had worse chances than you. Okay? Whatever percentages you think, yeah, but there's 3 girls to 1 guy in the community. Listen. 3 girls to 1 guy is an amazing set of chances compared to what Yosef was up against. And Borei Olam was doeg that he had his zivug amiti. And not just that, he had Ephraim, he had Menashe, he had Shvatim. Look at this plan, Rabotai, look at this plan. I have Dina, who was supposed to bring back Esav, Vatetse, she goes out to bring back Neshamot. She finds Shechem ben Chamor. She finally pulls out of him and brings back Hananiah ben Tradion. Little do we know that from this baby is going to come out later on Yosef's zivug in Mitzrayim, and two Shivteka, two Shvatim, Ephraim and Menashe. How could you ever look at life the same again after you hear the Shtikl Torah? Do you see the precision, the brilliance, the manipulation, the genius, the hashgacha behind every step that happens that's so perfect and precise for the good? And you were looking at this story, oh, how could that happen to Dina? Meanwhile, Amtalia bat Karnaval gets a tikkun. Abraham Avinu probably also got a tikkun from this, because the mother is always the Shoreshin. Abraham Avinu got a tikkun. Hananiah ben Tradion was brought back to Klal Yisrael. Esav almost got a tikkun. Almost. But at the same time, look what happens. Yosef gets a zivug. Shvatim are brought to Klal Yisrael on a story that people look at and grin. They say, what's Borei Olam doing? What's he doing? If you would know the genius of the perfection and the brilliance of what he did just in this maaseh alone, it will blow you away. Never doubt Abba. What he's doing is beyond brilliant, bringing tikkunim to Klal Yisrael, but bringing perfection to our lives. Sometimes it's not comfortable, and sometimes it's not even understandable, but it's still perfect. Thank you for listening, guys.